Greetings, Ebenezer family. I am Minister Lonnie Harris, and welcome back to Freedom in the Word. We certainly thankful for the May episodes featured around the mothers. Such a phenomenal time, such a phenomenal episodes. If you haven't seen them, please go back, review them. While you're here, we ask you to like, comment, share here with Freedom of the Word. As we are now getting ready to begin our June episodes, and the focus is on fatherhood. And we've asked for 4 dynamic men of Ebenezer Baptist Church to join me for the next 4 weeks. And the first week, we like to introduce you to our very own Coach Will Robinson. Coach, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Lonnie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, nice to see you, Coach. So as I talked to you off camera, and we talked and kind of prepared for this, our focus this month is going to be around fatherhood. Oftentimes fathers get forsaken; they get forgotten about. In the family dynamics.
Right.
We really just want to talk to you, along with some other gentlemen, just about the importance of fatherhood for them as individuals. Fatherhood for them growing up, as well as them now being fathers. Just their stance on that, and we'll kind of wrap up with just their thoughts around the church's role in playing a role as a man or a father in helping develop the younger generation to become men and productive men in our society. So, Coach, tell me just really about your background, how you grew up, your siblings, who was in your household, the father, who played the father role, if there was a father, etc. Talk to me.
Well, Lonnie, I grew up in a small town, if you would, called Cumberland, Virginia.
Okay.
Just outside of the big town, Farmville, Virginia.
I've been to Farmville.
Some people may be familiar with that, and it's located in Prince Edward County, Virginia, which is part of our history in Brown versus Board of Education. So Cumberland was a very small school. I started to attend Cumberland High School. The high school was 7 through 12, and we integrated this school, and that was a very difficult time.
Yeah.
At that particular time in our lives, because of the racial issues.
Definitely.
It's transpiring across the country, actually. I am the oldest boy of 5 boys. My sister is the oldest child of the 6
Okay.
of us.
Okay.
So, obviously, being the oldest boy, I had to somewhat be an example. My dad was in the home. My parents, my mom is a high school graduate.
Great.
And my dad stopped going to school 7th grade.
Wow.
My dad was pretty much a quiet guy until sports were involved. We grew up in a baseball atmosphere in the country, so baseball is big in the country. And
lots of fields and space.
Oh my goodness, lots of fields and space. In fact, we had a big garden and all that kind of stuff. Hogs. So I grew up in the country. But my dad, speaking of fathers, my dad was extremely instrumental in all of our lives.
Yeah.
The most major impact in my life growing up, simply because, not that he was an extra educated man, but because he was a hardworking man, and he made sure that his kids had everything that they need to do whatever they needed. I considered ourselves poor at that time. However, at that time, Lonnie, I didn't know that. Right?
Correct. You had what you needed.
Yeah, we had what we needed.
Yeah.
I remember, all 6 of us played sports in high school. We never wanted for anything in regards to equipment or anything like that. And my dad was mostly responsible for making sure that happened. And because he was such an outstanding baseball player, baseball became a big thing in our home. And he taught us how to play, and all the boys. And my sister played softball. So, basketball was not an issue. I was a basketball coach, but my parents knew nothing about basketball.
Okay.
My dad came home one day, shocked us, and he was coming home with this thing on the back of his truck, and we were excited. And he has a basketball goal attached to it. My dad knows nothing about basketball, but because his sons were so involved with playing basketball, my dad surprisingly came home and put up a basketball goal.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
That again spoke volumes of, you know, how much my dad was concerned about what we wanted to do and how we wanted to have recreation. My dad wasn't. He wasn't a man that would call us in and say, "Let's pray."
Mm-hmm.
You know, he attended church. My mom and he would attend church together, but I can't remember, Lonnie, any time during my childhood there was occasion when my dad really talked about the Lord.
Yeah.
My mom did.
Yeah. That's my case as well.
My mom introduced us to God,
yeah.
and what that was all about. And they made sure that we would go to Sunday school. You know,
correct.
We go to Sunday school, and sometimes we stay in Sunday school until they came for church. You know, but we were there. Even if they weren't there, they made sure that we went to Sunday school. But my dad was had a major impact on my life. Hard worker. I loved his kids. He wanted us all to be educated.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, while I was in college, I came home and my dad was sitting in the living room, and he had glasses on and he had the Bible. And I looked at my mom and I said, "What is he doing?" and my mom said, you know, my dad was reading,
mm-hmm.
Which I never saw as a kid. I never saw my dad read.
Correct.
So that was very impactful to me. And I knew that my mom had a great deal of influence in that regard. So my dad was a strong man, and he was the leader.
Yeah.
You know, like in the family, when you sit down to dinner, whoever is sitting, whichever end of the table that the dad sits on is the head of the table,
yes.
right? Whether it's the right or the left. So my dad would always sit on the right side, and I would always sit right next. And we kind of almost sat in chronological order almost, but that's the way it was. He was.
Who was the disciplinarian in your home?
My mom. My mom was the disciplinarian, but
mm-hmm.
if my dad did not like whatever it is that my mom had disciplined us for, there would be a double dose. I can tell you a quick story. I was a pretty decent student in high school, but this one particular year, you know, I was full of myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was a good athlete, and I wasn't doing well in school. And in our home, when reports card came in, we all would sit in the living room, and my mom would open one report card after the other.
Okay.
Right? And got to my report card, she just looked at me, you know, and I'm like, I was failing English. I'm a really good English. I did really well in English, you know, overall. But on this particular marking period, I didn't do anything. So I'm sitting there nervous, you know, and my mom didn't say anything. She just, you know, put it back in and went on.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad comes home, you know, and we're sitting as we usually in the living room watching TV together, you know, big family. We're sitting, you know, shoulder to shoulder, TV, watching TV. And I decide that I'm gonna go to bed early. I said, I'm tired. I'm gonna go to bed. So I did. I went to bed early, and later on in the middle of the night, I felt this breeze.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I felt this breeze.
Oh yeah.
And lo and behold, my father was introducing me to a different type of discipline and focus on academics. So yeah, my dad would when he spoke, you know, he was like E.F. Hutton. But my mom was mostly the disciplinarian.
So talk to me now, Coach, about you becoming a father, and I guess what you learned maybe from your dad, maybe from being the oldest of the 5 boys, what you learned that you instilled into your children, or what you learned that you didn't instill into your children. Either way.
Well, learn not to pull the covers back. You know, but what I think discipline, being orderly. I think, but most of all, I think treating people right, being mannerable, being polite, being courteous, being humble, being appreciative of all that you have. Because as a parent, we as parents wanted our children to have, as most parents, things that they couldn't have.
Yeah.
The best that they could possibly provide, and we wanted that for our children. And at the same time, we wanted them to understand and appreciate and be humble for what it is that they have. So the biggest lesson I think that we wanted to teach them is humility, be appreciative, and always thank God for what it is that they have.
Yeah, I think very good characteristics and traits that a lot of times we don't see in today's children, because we live now, what I've seen in a generation where people are just so unthankful. They don't have manners. I mean, just on simple things that, you know, I was raised, yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am.
Right.
That was it, with parents as well as any adults. Yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. Held the door for ladies, made sure, you know, all of those things. That's the way my mother raised us. That's the way my father raised us as well. You know as well, I've spoken with you as off camera in past. My father passed when I was 11 years old. And so my mother then took the role as being, you know, she had to, and what my mother didn't do, I had to learn, unfortunately, from my brother, who's just 2 years older than me. And that wasn't much of learning of anything.
You learned some things.
Correct. But nevertheless, in your role as a coach, because you're not just, I'll be honest, for those that don't know, you aren't just some YMCA coach that, you know, just has a whistle around their neck. You know, if you would speak briefly, you know, just about as your role in a coach, where you've come across maybe young men on a high school level or even on a national level, whatever level that you've coached on, that you've had to, maybe they didn't have father figures in their lives. Have you played roles or, you know, in advice, or do you still play those types of roles for young men that you've crossed in your past?
Actually, Lonnie, we do. I'm in connection with quite a number of our former players. When I came to Charlotte, I think the best example I can give you is in terms of that, answering that question. When I came to Charlotte, there was a young man in the basketball program at the Advanced High School, now Chambers, who had met or saw play when I did the interview here, and went to watch him play while I was in Charlotte, and then went back to Virginia. And while I was in Virginia, headed to Charlotte in the next few months, I got a phone call that his father passed. And I called him right away to let him know that we cared and we wanted to know how he was doing. Finally got to meet his mom and his family. That relationship is, that was in 2005. He is a professional basketball player that plays overseas now, and he is like a son today to us. We follow his games, but not just him. There are a number of players, and you know, I won't bore you with all of it, but the relationship, I wanted to, as a coach, establish a relationship that would be family-like. I would tell my players, if you play for me, then you're stuck with me for life. So there, we've been to, recently we just did a Zoom funeral with one of my former players. I just lost 4 players, former players in the last 4 months, in the last couple months. And that's been difficult. At the same time, there's not a week go by that I'm not on the phone with a former player. So that it was more than trying to win championships for me. It was establishing relationships and developing young men to be adult responsible men.
Correct.
That was more important. I would always say to my assistants, If you become a head coach, your job is to win the battle. Your job is not to win the battle. For the battles are the games that you play and the championships that you win. You are trying to win the war, and the war is when your kids are 25 and 26 and they come to your neighborhood or come to your area with their kids that they want to come and see you.
Yeah.
So that was always my goal.
As we prepare to wrap up this particular session, Coach, just talk to me. What do you think is the role of the church, the men of the church, within the scope of the church, to be, father figures, or if you believe that they do play a role as an example, whether you have scouting programs, you have, the men's program here that we have, the Abide program, men's fellowship. What do you think is the church's role in, where it can be a father figure or an example?
Well, I think especially for the young men is to want to be a shining example, because people often judge, they emulate what they see. And then your interaction with those particular people give them some sense of comfort. So once the young people feel that they are comfortable with you, and then you begin to impart the word of the Lord and begin to talk about circumstances and life issues, begin to have dialogue, that allows the younger people to open up their minds and hearts to be able to express where they are. Obviously, the world has changed and it's ever changing. So I think it's important, in order for us to reach them, we have to spend time with them. We can't judge them based on what we see all the time, because we don't know the minds and the heart of the child. In order to do that, you have to engage in conversation and allow some things that you may not agree with to come forward, so that later on you can plant seeds to help them navigate through those difficult times. But the church it will always play an important role in the development of young people and people in general. It's a matter of whether or not we're willing to step out there on that, branch and be a beacon of light and be a beacon of hope to the church.
I thoroughly agree, Coach. You have any last thoughts, any comments that you just want to leave our viewers?
Well, I think it's important, as we talk about fathers, that as parents, that we continue to be an example to our kids, and don't be afraid to share the good and the bad things.
Good point.
To give them, to let them know that, when you look at your parents, they are like this, right? But the kids have to know that they have struggles as well. And they go through pitfalls as well. And how we manage to be able to stand up again is through the Word of God. And that while you don't see God, God sees you, and He's working in you and working for you even while you're asleep. Plant the seed. And nurture the seed. And God will make the seed grow.
Wow. Plant the seed, nurture the seed, and God will make the seed grow. Wonderful closing thoughts from you, Coach. We appreciate your time. Join us again next week, Ebenezer family, as we welcome another man from Ebenezer Baptist Church as we focus on fatherhood. Till next week, God bless you.